All right, well, welcome to another workshop here at the test camp, and thanks to our hosts here today. This is Paraprofessional Education Mathematics. Let's discuss how learning and practicing test skills will empower your test confidence. Now, those of you joining us live online, sorry you couldn't be here with us today, but you're welcome to contribute your comments anytime, and we're going to include them right up here as part of our discussions. And if you join us directly through the Test Camp YouTube channel, of course, you can pause and restart or replay that video anytime. Now again, this workshop is one of 3 in our series for paraprofessional education tests. Feel free to ask questions during the workshop for you folks here, and I'm going to repeat them for everyone who's listening to the recording. So you know by now that around here the motto is prepare, practice, perform. Everyone who has successfully completed the training has passed their tests, and that's because test taking is a skill which requires practice, and this is the place to come to practice. It's the only place you can come to learn and practice the test skills. So let's get started. To prepare here at the test camp means to understand yourself, an honest assessment of how well you know the test content and how well you know your testing skills. So we start by learning the test blueprint. A lot of you were in the other workshops, so you know that the blueprint is what you need to understand to fully understand a test. And assessing your knowledge of the blueprint, that's the first indicator of how well you're going to perform on the test. You're going to know the content, you're going to know the rules. So this can also be a good step towards creating what we call My Study Plan, which is simply a schedule for reviewing and studying your test content. All right, let's get started on that blueprint again. Here's an overview of the entire test, what they call the ParaPro assessment. And this is the test that many of you have already signed up for. Is that what I understand? All right, so you still have plenty of time for training. Notice that this exam is a series of 3 individual tests, each one very different, but all combined. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. The mathematics test has 30 multiple choice questions, and the time allotted is 60 minutes. Or is it? Not really, because really you have 150 minutes for all 3 sections. We're just suggesting that you budget about 2 minutes for each math problem. We also suggested the same back for the reading questions in that workshop earlier. All right, so this plan will help you establish a pace for success. You decide when to answer a problem and when to save it for the next pass through your test. And that's one of the testing skills we practice over at the training center. All right, our first step now, though, is to identify what types of math questions you can expect to encounter on your test. And we're not talking about the format because we know they're all multiple choice. We're talking about each math competency on which the test questions are built. And here's how we isolate each competency in our individual quizzes at the test camp. You take quizzes based on each competency, which provides you instant feedback and points you in a direction to review and study. Now, one of these competencies you see up here is not included on this test. Can you see which one it is? Over here, go ahead, what do you think? Yeah, that's correct, teaching. Nothing about instructional strategies on this test. That's reserved for the subject area exams, all right, but not on the ParaPro assessment. So let's take a closer look at each competency, beginning up there with numbers. You're going to find that in the test information guides that these are the main concepts associated with numbers questions. Now, proving your competency with numbers, that also includes proving your knowledge of place value, rounding, and estimating. So let's take a quick look at a couple sample questions based on this competency. All right, so it's clear why this is a numbers question, right? Because of all those fractions. Let's look at another example. What do you see here? Percent, fractions, and decimals, right? One more. Just from the answers, we can tell that this is going to be a numbers question. All right, and there's dozens of these types of questions over at the training center, so you can check your knowledge on this competency. You're going to be great on this area. The next competency is algebra. Now this might be the easiest one to identify. Maybe not the easiest to solve these problems, but definitely you can tell when you're looking at an algebra question. Here's how. Variables and equations. Here's another example. Is this algebra? Yes, sir, it is. But it's also an example of a question you're probably going to want to mark and save because there's just too much involved here, too many steps to solve this problem on the first pass through the test. One more. All right, so some algebra questions might require you to create the equation. So this is definitely one you're going to want to mark and save. Too much reading, too involved. You don't want to stop your momentum on the test. All right, so again, there's a training activity that's going to help you practice that skill. Another type of algebra question involves the coordinate plane. All right, so you remember the coordinate plane, right? No groaning out there. Now, why was there a need in mathematics to teach you the coordinate plane? Well, math can explain movement, so let's think about it. If 0 is your starting point, what do you need to know to get to that point marked up there? You need to know about your position and where you're going. So you can identify algebra questions because they have variables and equations, but also ordered pairs. And remember slope? So ordered pairs shows you the position, slope shows you the direction. Again, there's a quiz designed, so you're going to be fine on this. You get to test your knowledge in this competency area, no problem. The next competency is geometry. And if you had to explain geometry to elementary students in just one word, what would you say? What is geometry really about? There you go over there, shapes, exactly. So let's look at some sample questions here. This is just the answer set. And even without the stem, it's clear that this is a question based on shapes or geometry. Here's another sample. Pretty obvious that this is also a geometry question. All right, let's take a look at one more. Again, definitely geometry. It's about shapes. But how about this next one? The next comp is going to be measurement, and there are several approaches to determining if a question is based on measurement. But you remember we just said geometry is about shape, then measurement is about units. So think about the units being measured. Here are some. Okay, so for height, maybe feet or inches or stories. Weight, kilograms, grams, pounds. Distance, maybe miles, right? That sort of thing. Leagues, 20,000 leagues under the sea. Do you remember that? Old Disney movie. Rate and time would have to do with speed. So these are pretty easy to identify also. Here's a question that has to do with measurement. The common conversion question. And here's the more complicated but classic took a trip question. You remember these? Probably one you would want to mark and save. Probably too involved. You'd have plenty of time to come back around the test a second or third time. Now here's an interesting example of a measurement question. Notice that this question is a combination of geometry, a shape that you're being asked to measure. So really, which competency is being tested here? I think you're right. I think it's geometry because you have to know something about the shape. Okay, but in either case, this helps you know what you're trying to answer. So there's the first 4 competencies. At your tables, talk about the 5th competency. Do you remember what it was? All right, well, talk amongst yourselves, and when you get it, be ready to explain what types of questions that you think might be included in this 5th competency. And we'll come back as a group and discuss your answers. Hey, for those of you joining us today live online, share your thoughts and we'll include them in the discussion. And if you're joining us by the Test Camp YouTube channel, this might be a good time to pause the recording and think about this competency. By the way, it's data. So do you know test content that's included in data? All right, we'll be here when you restart the video. Everybody got it, I'm sure. We came up with the 5th competency, which is data. You are correct. And here at the test camp, we learned to identify these types of questions very easily because they're usually a report of facts. Remember, geometry was shape, measurement is units, data is facts. In this first example, if a data question reports facts from the present or from the past, like in this question, it's reporting statistics. All right, here's another example. If a data question is using facts to make a prediction about a future event, that's right, it's called probability. There you go. So you have statistics and probability. Okay, many data questions are easy to identify because they're giving you the facts through images or graphs or tables, charts, that sort of thing. Here's another example. And during your training, you're going to learn how to mark and save these questions. You get to practice that. This is probably one you would not, believe it or not, you would not answer this the first time through. Also included is central tendency. Do you remember what this means? In simple terms, central means in the middle, right? So finding what's in the middle. Do you remember these terms? All right, well, here's an example of a data question related to central tendency. In a few minutes, we'll discuss the best resources for reviewing and studying for this test, and that includes these kind of terms in there. So there you have it, the competencies used to construct questions for the ParaPro assessment. 30 questions, 30 minutes. Well, actually we said 60 minutes, didn't we? Because you really want to take about, well, you could at least budget 2 minutes per question. All right. So what do you know about the percent to pass on this? It's kind of shady. The percent recommended and what you have to get here at the test camp is 80%. And that's way more than you'll probably need on your test. This is also required on our quizzes and our tests. So 30 questions, 80%, you'd need about a 24. That's your goal when you work with us. But be sure to check the required score in your area. It's probably going to be in the mid-70s. Okay? But remember, your score is going to count towards your total score for the ParaPro assessment. And there's 3 main areas. Do you remember that? Mathematics is just one of those areas. So let's consider these competencies for math in a different way. And that is, which would you choose? If you're going to take a test for ParaPro and you could just do it on one of these areas, which is your strongest area, which is your most challenging, and how do you study for something like this? Where do you start? All right, talk it over at your tables, then we'll discuss your preferences as a group. Hey, for those of you joining us today live online, thank you again for sharing your thoughts. We've been including them up here as you see in the discussion boards. And if you're watching this pre-recorded workshop, pause the recording and do a little self-reflection. Which would you choose and how do you prepare for a standardized test? Come back and join us. Restart the video anytime. Okay, so we had some interesting discussion about the strategies to review and study for standardized tests. I think we can summarize by saying that there's no right way for everyone. However, we all agree that we do need to go back and review or study at least a little bit to get ready for this thing. All right, so how do we do that? Well, to prepare for the test, you join this workshop. So you've gained some knowledge about what to expect. Another way to prepare is to select the tools or the resources that you might need to guarantee your success. So expect to see this sign along the pathways during your training. Those who have gone before you, they leave encouraging messages, and then sometimes they also include recommendations. And in this case, the message is, avoid spending your time and money on expensive resources that you just don't need. Commercial webinars are a good example. Avoid paying for free test information and strategies, right? Why pay for it if it's free? Expensive tutors and tutoring companies, they might be an option for more challenging tests, but the math here only goes up through 8th grade. Be cautious too of overpriced study guides is what they're saying. They've seen study guides for over $40. Have you seen this? Yeah, these study guides are sold for profit, and many of the study guides available are either free or inexpensive. We'll show you how in just a minute to get to those. A more effective and inexpensive resource is textbooks. And now that you know the competencies being tested, you can use textbooks to review and study the test content. So over at the Training Center in the My Resources area, expect to find the most popular and up-to-date tools for your success. And you can see them right there. That study guide that's a used study guide, what, $15. So everything is either free or very inexpensive. So instead of investing time and money on resources, invest time in yourself. You can practice your test skills. Expect to gain confidence and personal independence. Your pass provides admission to these training areas. Up there at the top, that's My Test. That's the activity that enables you to check your understanding. It's where we started today. Now you can test to see how well you actually know this test. You know the blueprint and everything we've discussed here today. You can also take a pre-test in this area that we call My Test. This is the test camp problem solving system. The first step to finding the correct answer is to Identify the type of question by the competency. Then we did that a little bit of that here today, right? All right, then you have quizzes and tests. These provide an opportunity to practice your test skills while you're assessing your test content knowledge, where you might want to go and review and study, because the quizzes are all based right there on the competencies. The questions and answers are changed randomly, so on each attempt you're going to get a different quiz. Over in the test area, there's practice tests with features like those you can expect on test day, and there's that post test that you can pass that, and then you earn points towards a professional test certificate, and that guarantees your success. All right, so then expect to perform with the confidence that comes from both having the knowledge and the skills earned during the training. Let's get started. There's no better time than now to empower your test confidence.